Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something a little different. It's a short story called Pasted Text. And fair warning, this one is pretty intense.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
No, it really dives into some dark themes,
Yeah.
like identity obsession and really blurry lines between love and something much more sinister.
Especially with the backdrop of a global pandemic that the story uses. That feeling of isolation and uncertainty. Well, it just adds this whole other layer of, well, creakiness to the whole thing.
It's definitely unsettling.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning, you get this sense that something is just not quite right with the relationship between these two young women, Angel and Lana.
Yeah, like on the surface, they seem like total opposites.
You've got Angel, who's kind of reserved, and then Lana, who's the life of the party.
It's a charismatic one.
Exactly. But then there's this intensity to their bond.
Almost like they're trying to absorb each other.
Yeah, it's like they're mirroring each other, trying on different aspects of each other's personality.
Yeah. Like they're both searching for something in the other person. Like trying to fill some kind of void within themselves.
And the pandemic just throws gasoline on that whole dynamic, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. They're dealing with fear, grief, and this desperate need to connect in a world that feels like it's falling apart at the seams.
And that's what makes those little details at the beginning of the story even more unsettling in hindsight.
Like, what do you mean?
I'm talking about that scene where Lana gives Angel some of her clothes and says that line, "Whatever's mine is also yours."
Oh, yeah. At first, it just seems like a sweet gesture between friends.
Right.
But knowing what happens later.
It takes on this whole different meaning. It's like this foreshadowing of something much darker.
It's almost like foreshadowing the unhealthy merging that happens later, the way those boundaries get completely obliterated.
And the pandemic itself almost becomes like a character in the story, pushing them further and further into this isolated world.
It's like a pressure cooker for their obsession.
Exactly. And then to make matters even worse, you have the whole betrayal with Angel's boyfriend.
Oh, man, don't even get me started on that.
He dumps her for Lana. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
That's like a major turning point in the story.
Yeah.
Because it just triggers this whole cascade of emotions in Angel: jealousy, humiliation, this feeling of being completely replaced.
It's not just romantic betrayal, it's like a betrayal of their friendship, their shared identity almost.
Right, like Lana is taking over every part of Angel's life.
And there's this one detail that just stuck with me. It's when Angel overhears her ex muttering Lana's name during sex.
Ugh, it's so invasive. So brutal, you can just feel the depth of Angel's humiliation.
It's like Lana's presence is invading even the most intimate parts of Angel's life. Parts that should be completely separate from their friendship.
And that violation, it just gets worse and worse as the story goes on.
Because things spiral even further out of control. The pandemic intensifies, and Angel's mother gets sick and dies.
Leaving Angel completely alone except for Lana and her mother.
It's like the walls are closing in on her.
And that isolation, that feeling of having no one else to turn to, it just feeds Angel's dependence on Lana even more.
She becomes Angel's only source of comfort in a world that feels increasingly hostile and unpredictable.
It's like the perfect storm is brewing, right? Angel's reeling from loss and betrayal. She's totally isolated, and her obsession with Lana is just growing stronger and stronger.
And then comes the twist that throws everything into overdrive. Lana gets the virus, and it looks like it's going to be fatal.
Right, but then the doctors offer this radical, almost unbelievable solution.
They can save Lana's consciousness, but not her body.
And their plan is to implant it into Angel.
Whoa. That's where the story takes this sharp turn into science fiction, but also into this really ethically complex territory.
You're immediately hit with all these questions, like, did Lana even consent to this? What does it mean for Angel's own identity to become a vessel for someone else's consciousness?
It really forces you to think about the boundaries of technology and the potential for even good intentions to have some really messed up, unintended consequences.
Yeah, like how far can we go in the name of saving someone?
And at first, Angel seems almost relieved, like she sees this as her chance to save her best friend, her twin, from death.
But we know from the very beginning that there's something much darker brewing beneath the surface.
It's like that line Lana says earlier, "Whatever's mine is also yours." It becomes so much more chilling now.
Totally. It's not this nice, friendly thing anymore.
It's more like she owns her, right?
Yeah, it's this declaration of ownership, almost like she's justifying erasing Lana's individuality.
It's really messed up. Like her desire to be just like Lana, to possess her, has become something really dark.
Yeah, it's like a distorted kind of love. Like a grotesque version of it.
It reminds me of when you're younger. You have those friendships where you just want to be exactly like your best friend.
You share everything. You want to be the same person.
But this story takes it way too far.
For sure. And the pandemic makes it even worse. Like, it just intensifies those feelings of isolation and blurs the lines even more.
Angel's literally becoming Lana,
Oh.
right?
Hmm.
Her body is housing Lana's consciousness.
Which is a violation in so many ways.
And the story doesn't hold back on showing the consequences of that. It all leads up to the climax, which might be one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever read.
It's rough. It's like that twisted version of whatever's mine is also yours. It takes over completely.
It's like it's controlling her.
Yeah, and it leads to her hurting herself. It's this brutal act where she cuts herself with a box cutter.
And she thinks that by hurting herself, she's sharing that pain with Lana.
Like they're creating this ultimate bond through suffering.
It's so desperate and disturbing, and Lana's trapped inside screaming in agony.
She can't do anything to stop it.
Which is awful. It's like they both lose control. Angel becomes both the victim and the perpetrator.
Driven by this obsession that has taken over her whole identity.
And Lana, who was the object of her adoration, becomes a prisoner in her own mind.
Forced to watch her own destruction. It's tragic.
It's like their desire to be like each other has twisted into this horrific fusion.
It's become this awful parody of their friendship.
And the really sad part is it's all rooted in this messed up sense of love.
Yeah, Angel really thinks she's doing what's best for Lana. That she's fulfilling Lana's wish to always be together.
But that's the thing about obsession, right? It can trick you into thinking it's love.
It makes it really hard to see the difference between healthy and destructive behavior.
The ending is just haunting.
Yeah.
You're left with Lana's voice screaming inside Angel's mind.
It makes you think about where love ends and obsession begins.
It makes you wonder, is Angel just insane, or is there some twisted logic to what she's doing?
That's what makes pasted text so unsettling. There are no easy answers.
It really makes you confront the darkness that can hide, even in love.
And it makes you think about what you might do in extreme circumstances.
How far would you go to hold on to someone you love? I mean, it makes you think about all the ways we try to connect with people, right? Like we have social media, virtual reality, even just sharing a story.
It's all about trying to bridge that gap between yourself and someone else, creating some kind of shared reality.
But this story pasted text. It suggests that sometimes that can go too far.
Yeah, like our desire to connect it can twist into something darker.
Like a need to control.
Like a need to merge with another person and completely erase any boundaries.
It feels like a warning. Especially now with everything being digital and those lines being even more blurred.
Definitely makes you think about what real intimacy even means.
Can you really be that close to someone without respecting boundaries? Your own boundaries and theirs.
That's the question, isn't it? And this story shows how easily those boundaries can disappear.
Especially when you're dealing with really intense emotions.
And especially when something like a pandemic comes along and just throws everything into chaos.
Well, this has been an intense deep dive into pasted text, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been pretty heavy.
But it really makes you think, which I think is the sign of a really great story.
It's thought-provoking. It challenges you. It definitely stays with you.
It makes you confront things that maybe you don't want to think about.
And it leaves you with more questions than answers.
I definitely recommend going back and reading the story again with all of this in mind.
Yeah, pay attention to little things. The way the relationships change, the way the pandemic affects everything.
You might be surprised by what you notice.
For sure.
So there you have it. We took a deep dive into pasted text, a story about identity obsession and how technology can blur the lines between us.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay curious.